Know, O Prince, that between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Arias, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like blue mantles between the stars. Nemedia, Ophir, Bithynia, Hyperborea, Zamora with its dark-haired women and towers of mystery, Zingara with its chivalry, Koth that bordered on the pastoral lands of Shem, Stygia with its shadow-guarded tombs, Hyrcania, whose riders wore steel and silk and gold. But the proudest kingdom of the world was Aquilonia, reigning supreme in the dreaming west. Hither came Conan, the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet. Well, kids, looks like we're doing the Barbarian episode. So, talking about the meaning of the word barbarian, for what I understand, the etymology of the word comes from the Greek barbaros. And they were referring to any other civilization that spoke any language other than Greek. As to them, it was kind of gibberish, so they referred to what the other civilization were saying as barbar. So if you think about this, it's funny because they call barbarians people as Egyptians, Persians, and Phoenicians. So basically they use the term to refer to the other, the stranger, the foreigner. In a way, it's not dissimilar to the way the Japanese use the word gaijin to refer to alien or non-Japanese person, especially Westerners. Funny that this video came to me as an idea while I was drinking in Covent Garden here in London the other night in a beer house, and I saw a plaque that said Barbar. And I went, hold on a second, we can do a video about this. So it seems that the word took more prominence when Slavic tribes started attacking the southern towns, getting closer to the Mediterranean. And it seems that this raid, rob, and pillage pesky habit was the medium in which it translated back north, to other civilizations. It kept traveling north, apparently, this meaning of the word. So if we compare them with Vikings, the word Viking refers to a river from a Scandinavian country. All Vikings were northerners, but not all northerners were Vikings. They meant they had a job to do, and that job consisted on bringing resources, just going out there, getting resources from other settlements and other communities and other countries, Now, how politely they asked about those resources, it's open to interpretation. But they were also merchants, so I suppose raided and traded is a thing. And in that respect, Vikings were not different than Roman legionaries, or the British, or the US military, but let's just not get that political. Here we also find the legend of the Berserkers, a special type of raiding Viking that took mushrooms so not to feel pain and become invincible. Apparently partly true, as no matter how much pain you ignore, you can't live without 2 pints of blood in your bloodstream or half of your brain missing. For some reason they like to think themselves spiritually to bears. Another important fact that I would like to bring to this video is that when you are a civilization of conquerors, you carry your culture and your customs with you, but you also adapt to where you move. So a few kings in the West sat in thrones here in England, initially. And they will be what you would call barbarians, but I doubt they would sit in the throne to receive their subjects just dressed on a loincloth and just, carrying the sword, like, oh yes, Eventually, they would adopt a lot more logical garb and more local table manners, at least to a point. For instance, Rollo was a Viking who ended up as Count of Rouen, and he became the first ruler of Normandy. Okay, I will add this photo too for the ladies. Harold was a son of Godwin, the powerful Earl of Wessex, and Githa Thorkelsdottir, whose brother Ulf the Earl was married to Estrid Svensdatter. Oh, I'm killing this. Sorry about that. The daughter of King Svein Forkbeard. Like, think about this. How much more epic can you be than Forkbeard? King Knut was King of England in 1006, King of Denmark 1008, and King of Norway 1010. Well, you know where I'm going with this. We cannot take the Viking away from a person, but the person can adopt more things from where they settle. I'll get back to this later. So let's talk about the early stories of Conan, as you cannot really talk about Barbarians without talking about Conan. Robert E. Howard was born in Pister, Texas, and in some point he started writing pop stories for the Weird Tales magazines and others. It's funny how at the time there was Weird Tales, Astounding Stories, The Argosian. There were many magazines, but authors preferred to publish their content in the platforms that paid them the better. How funny it is how things have not changed in so long, but I digress. Twitch. So, Weird Tales was king of this. In his anthology novel, The Valley of the Worm, I noticed a subliminal message, well, although not so subtle, coming from Howard, where I think he was trying to generate a mythology for America, not unlike the mythology for Britain that Tolkien tried to write when he wrote his seminal work, The Lord of the Rings. North America, as great a country as it is, it doesn't have much in terms of written ancient history. And with that, you don't have an ancient mythology either. Nothing that could compare to other cultures, at least. Most of Native American mythology was oral tradition, and it was transmitted from generation to generation. So Howard, I believe, wanted to create ancient worlds of myth and wonder, and hither came Conan and the Hyborian Age. I'm not going to elaborate much into this because the video will be 4 hours long, and I'm pretty sure, and I know, there are people out there who have elaborated on this subject way more and way better than I could. So just go on there and check them out. It's absolutely fascinating. So let's proceed. I really got in touch with Conan through comics first, films later, and then the books. The most prominent illustrator of, let's say, the covers of this barbarian goodness is Frank Frazetta. His style reflecting how primitive and savage the world our protagonists inhabit. Raw meat, tribes hunting with spears, the occasional survivor dinosaur roaming around and being appeased with sacrifices. All sorcerers are evil, and their cults commit enough heinous acts that will keep a hero busy for centuries. Does not get any better than that. I did grow to appreciate, as an illustrator myself, the work of Barry Windsor-Smith, John Buscema, Ernie Chan, and Esteban Maroto, among others, and especially the scripts written by Roy Thomas and the adaptations of the original Howard's work. Now, here's a thing that bothers me a lot. Conan is far from being an ignorant, dirty savage. He's extremely practical, but the man speaks every language in the world and can read and write at least half of them. He despises magic, but understands the subject because he's been played far too many times. So he's also very quite culturally savvy around the customs of the people wherever he goes. And believe it or not, he's far from being a Mary Sue. Barely anyone could defeat him in combat, but he finds himself captured more often than not. And half of the times that he gets rescued, it is a lady at the other side of the cage. The 80s saw the success of Conan the Barbarian by John Milius and actually Oliver Stone, and gave way to a slew of other media trying to exploit the barbarian trope. We had Ator, the Fighting Eagle, produced in Italy, the Deathstalker series, a tongue-in-cheek rendition with the Barbarian twins. They will do anything to write a scantily clad tanned and oiled dude with a loincloth wielding a sword, even when the setting barely holds its existence together, like the Beastmaster. Bless you, Bryan Singer, one of the nicest dudes alive. The barbarian trope also has transcended to other mythos. Kratos is a barbarian of Greek origin. He's the son of Zeus. At this point, we're all related because Zeus could not keep it in his pants anyway, but let's not digress. And that gives him divine powers somehow, but he still acts and looks the part. Slain is derived mostly from Celtic and Scottish mythos, and I would believe some entire passages including about these characters were written in Ogans in tree bark, and they changed the name Cuchulainn for Slain and called it a day. I love this character. He even has a guy bulk for Crumb's sake. Wolverine, no, don't switch off the video yet, just hear me out. Wolverine has exactly the same traits of a barbarian. I will talk more in depth about this later, but he has everything that we find endearing about a barbarian. He even has regenerating powers that will make him somehow act like a berserk. You remember the dudes that believe themselves invincible? Lobo is kind of serious, kind of dark humor set in space, same attitude. Is a kind of character that you would need someone like Jason Momoa to play him. But that would be if Jason Momoa stopped doing children's movies for a sec. It's another big, rude, and savage anti-hero that is just as endearing as you can tell. Now let's get a little bit more serious and let's go for Kharn the Betrayer. So in the far future, there is only war. Kharn the Betrayer is the biggest proponent on the barbarian trope in the Warhammer 40k universe. You have Angron and such, but what Kharn gets up to cannot even be topped by a Primarch. And we have He-Man, who doesn't like barbarians in space. Still, it's the same trope, except with a split personality. You have Prince Adam, that is mild-mannered, spoiled, walking disaster that transforms into the hero with the echoey, booming voice that is as brave and strong as a god. Funny what comes out when you make the toy line first and then trying to come up with the franchise after. Grow. Come on. Whoever has ever read one of Gronan the Wanderer's comics by Sergio Aragonés will never forget him. Good with the sword, thick as a brick. People try to keep him away from their cities, just in case he tries to get in to help, with disasters and unintended consequences. His legend keeps growing. Zorn. Let me just give a bit of a send-off to a character that unceremoniously was cancelled by Fox after one season. Love you, fella. So let's finally talk about gaming. Hero Quest. I've mentioned Hero Quest by passing in the Dungeons video. It is a dungeon crawler, one of the best ever made. But we have the barbarian option there too. Most people will tell you that the character is broken, that it's somehow better than the others. Those people will tell you that. And they are right. The reason why this character is in the game as a playable class is the same reason why it is a playable class in Dungeons and Dragons. Conan the board game. This game was produced by Monolith, and it normally could be found around in Kickstarters. Although sometimes I found it in shelves around Forbidden Planet or the Orc's Nest. One important bit of info is that the role-playing game, the 2D20 system published by Modifuse, is now out of print, but they had aids to mix it seamlessly with the board game through supplements for maps and stuff. It seems that Modifuse didn't want to negotiate the license any further. So what I know I can see in the book is it's a great game, has great rules, great quality artwork, but it's a little bit all over the place, and that played against how much is sold. I really hope Monolith takes it from here and it makes it backwards compatible with all the obscene amount of supplements I have for this. Please. Golden Axe. Axe the Butler. That was the name of the guy. One of the 3 options that you had in Golden Axe, at least until Golden Axe 2. Of course, you had more options from Golden Axe 3 onwards. But here you go. I would say the girl was a barbarian too. She was my favorite, since she had more moves and too lonely, poor, hormonal 13-year-old me. Nothing beats a girl with a sword on the screen. Heroes of Might and Magic. For some people, this game needs no introduction. But those younger, this is a turn-based, narrative, treasure hunting strategy game that makes you take decisions on how to build your fortress, your castle settlement, or whatever. What to build first and what troops you will get by the end of a week. So it goes by days. There were several factions to choose from, but some people preferred the overwhelming damage caused by the creatures led by the Barbarians. The Barbarian stronghold, called the Stronghold, also had the advantage of letting your heroes run away in the middle of a siege. Diablo 2 onwards. Here is the point where in video games we get to see real action-packed traits on what being a barbarian should be according to high fantasy. Of course, there were games like Eye of the Beholder or more D&D related games where you could just create a barbarian, but this is where we saw it in action. Generally, we had a character that finally could dual wield axes, having a massive pool of life and fury related powers. Dungeons and Dragons and the Baldur's Gate franchise. Now we are getting closer to the source. In Dungeons and Dragons, the Barbarian is the only one class that, in order to advance its hit points, rolls 1d12. So every time they go up a level, they get a chance of getting between 1 and 12 more hit points. It was the highest die. The best die after this one is the d10 for fighters. That's 1 and 10. The Barbarian also gets bonus armor by not wearing armor, being able to add their Constitution bonus also to their Dexterity bonus for armor. Maybe it didn't matter so much on 3.5 edition because you had infinite points of armor that you could find. But in 5e it's much more preferable. A few times a day, a barbarian can enter a fury stage that lets them divide a great amount of types of damage in half. As long as they keep attacking every round, they get advantage on athletic checks and everything. Of course, everything in the rules in 5e was translated to Baldur's Gate 3, where you could have gotten a barbarian in Baldur's Gate 1 too, and the results would have been similar. So why are they mixed in so many RPGs? The answer, Appendix N. So most RPGs draw inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons in one way or another. They are the granddaddy of all tabletop RPGs and all the video games and board games that drew inspiration from the tabletop RPGs. But Dungeons and Dragons itself drew inspiration from somewhere else. And that list of sources is what we call Appendix N. It was towards the back of the book that you could find this list. These are all a bunch of very loosely related works, all appealed to young Gary Gygax. Among there was, of course, Lord of the Rings, which is the wellspring of high fantasy, but we also have the Conan books in that list. And those are no high fantasy. Those are a different genre called Sword and Sorcery. They're both fantasy offshoots, but they are different. As I mentioned, Lord of the Rings is what we call high fantasy because magic is really prevalent. A setting that we could call low fantasy would be A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones. Diablo belongs to dark fantasy, and Sword and Sorcery is, well, like I mentioned before, a lot more primitive. Very much scaled down. People don't know what chainmail is or a crossbow. So why are they in your world? You probably can see now where I am going with this. Barbarians in a fantasy RPG, it's a little bit of a ham-fisted attempt to fit an Appendix N reference into a world that is extremely mismatched. A barbarian would adapt after a few years to its surroundings, or they would generate too much distrust from their party. And the world needs to accommodate for the barbarian's nation of origin. You need to give them a military reason not to have been conquered. And you can even add a geological factor in there, such as terrain being very inaccessible for a marching army. If you don't do this, it makes no sense to have a raiding civilization or simply a less advanced one existing. There would be just another story to tell to children in the winter nights. So what is it that we look for in Barbarians? In Barbarians, we look for freedom. That's it. Uninhibited strength, both in character and physical. The ability not to have to think too much about your troubles and sort them out easily the way you know best. When Travis Willingham, bless him, love that guy to bits, created Grog Strongjaw for the Critical Role series, he was new to playing tabletop role-playing games, and he wanted someone who didn't have to take decisions around the table. He was dumb and strong and fun to play. Probably he didn't foresee how much we got to love the character, or let's face it, none of the players saw how strongly Critical Role was going to take off. If he just knew how this character was going to take off too, and how beloved it was going to be, I'm not sure if he would have tried to make him a little bit more clever. But I still have my Funko. Barbarians are anti-heroes. People with a murky past who can put their strength and toughness to use to advance a noble cause. Maybe for money, or maybe because, after all, they have a heart. Or just like Conan, just because that thing that sorcerer is doing to those people is wrong. How enjoyable has always been when we see a very powerful villain finally putting all that strength, power, and energy on our side. Let's look at Loki, Magneto, Piccolo, Vegeta, the list goes on. So what can we do better? I reckon having a middle point would be good. Don't make barbarians so primitive, and if you intend to add them to a high fantasy setting. What we find endearing in Conan, you can also find in Wolverine, Lobo, the Hulk, Khal Drogo, the Hound. You can look at Worf in Star Trek and find a good barbarian there. You don't need the scantily clad fella out of setting, completely out of setting, to get the same feeling when the main character says, "Wait until such and such gets here and gets angry." Thank you for watching.